Hey, aren't you pretty? I'm fine. I sent her a text this morning and said, are you coming with me? And I got her back, so I don't know. I guess that meant she wanted to go. And she's still hesitant. I think that's all. Hey.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, she did. She's about 2 miles down the road. Oh, fantastic. How are you? Yeah, I can get
That's on that toast.
When's the last time I had that here? It started, yeah, I got it. They waited, they dealt with it yesterday. Don't know. I've had one here. That's all.
Uh-huh.
That's all. Ooh, so you want to see all these?
Yeah.
Is it the thing?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. I sent money in. What's the name? They're all closed. They're all closed. They send you.
Killing it.
No, I know. But they told you it's all closed. They even make you walk the dog.
I ain't got my good killing shoes
You'll
on yet.
have to pick me up.
It's just rough when it hits you. Just mail it in and
They don't let you.
it's so they make everybody they give it to me.
They don't let you hold it.
Like if Dad gave me his Sunpass thing, I couldn't even use it. They're on their way, but I'll have to be.
Is that an excuse?
I mean, you might get called out and not know about it, but. Yeah. Now, Tyler Sauter, am I really the type that would do something like that? Yeah. Thank you, Brooke. In case y'all didn't hear that, I was making eye contact with Brother Oscar, and he looks up at the clock and says, "You're late anyway." I just thought you and Marty were our new security team, because if anybody walked in and saw anything that ugly, they just automatically turn and know this is not the place for them. So I figured that was what the plan was. That's what I just, didn't know that's what the security team was.
But if I'm not ugly enough, we always got me on.
That's right. You know what my dad used to say about his dad, who was a twin? He's like, my dad never had to worry about being the ugliest guy in the room. He just know he was tied for it. So, there you go. He may not be the ugliest guy in the room. It's good to be here this morning. Good to see y'all. I know you're glad to see my face. I'm just enjoying looking. Tedfords, it is awesome to have y'all back. Did we switch the plates to a 4-to-1? I mean, just while you're here, I know somebody works in the tag office, if we need to do that, so no pressure.
We have a trailer with Florida tags and a truck with Texas tags, so.
A double-minded man, brother. A double-minded man. And just remember that what happened the last time y'all left Florida, I don't know if you remember this, but the last time you left Florida, what happened? I'm not saying that a tornado tried to wipe y'all's trailer. I'm just saying, read the tea leaves. That's all I'm saying. Good to have y'all back. Good to have y'all with us for a while. Anything we want to make mention of before we kick off our Bible class this morning? All right. Nothing all at once. Mr. Mark, do you mind kicking us off with a word of prayer before we get started?
Lord, we thank you for this day that you've given us. Lord, we thank you for allowing us to come out once again and study your word, be together once again, fellowship like this. Lord, be with us as we go out throughout this study. We give Dan the things that he's prepared to say. We can say them in a way that we can understand them and apply to our lives. Lord, be with all those that are sick in the congregation. Be with them and their caregivers that they can come back and be back with us once again. Lord, we thank you once again for creation and all that you do for us and all the blessings. We do all these things in Jesus' name.
Amen. Amen. All right, we're only 4 classes in, so I want to just do a quick review just to kind of get everybody caught up and on the same page. What we're really studying is the lineage of Jesus, the genealogy of Jesus. That's John Henry. Let me know he's got his eye on me. Just got brothers that keep you on your toes. All right, we're studying that line of Jesus. I don't know if y'all remember, we spent a little time actually on the genealogy in that first one and kind of just thinking about where Jesus came from. Then we kind of followed Matthew's line where he just says he's the son of David. Then he's the son of Abraham. We talked a little bit about David. We talked about Abraham, and I just felt I felt like we were sprinting through Abraham last Sunday, like just kind of giving you a big, just kind of an overview because there's just a lot to cover. So I kind of, with y'all's permission, I want to kind of come back around and just spend a little bit more time on Abraham and even give you the reasons why I think that's why that's important. Why the lineage of Christ? Why do we have that? And let me even go back further than that. Why even the Bible? I mean, where does Genesis 1:1, where are we in history when Genesis 1:1 is starting to be inspired? Who's writing Genesis? Being inspired to do so. So Moses is writing. He's not there. He's been inspired and guided to write this information. Why? Why now? Where are they? What are the children of Israel? Where are they? What's going on? Where they even need to be told this information?
Well, he's trying to tell them they're on their journey.
Okay.
They're wandering around. They've left Egypt. And for those that might not know, he's trying to tell them who they are. Who are we as a nation, and what is our background, and what's our future?
Who are you? Whose are you? Where did you come from? Why would they need that message? Where have they been, and possibly ballparkish for how long? Where have they been? Captivity. What kind of captivity? Egyptian. That's a Yahweh fearing, God fearing, no idolatry location. They're going to be getting a good, proper biblical education in that environment for hundreds of years of raising their kids there, generations born there, whatever. And as God comes into, it's almost like, as you read in the Exodus account when all is going, it's almost like God is reintroducing himself to the people. Because maybe in some regards, they've forgotten. Go ahead.
That's what he had to do.
That's right.
Because they didn't know nothing about nothing. I mean, these generations that's past, they've been in Egypt worshiping all kind of gods and everything. So
and you've been raised for hundreds of years. Can God's people forget who they are and where they come from? Does it take very long? So they've had all of that culture, all that history, and so God kind of commissions Moses to start writing this down. And we're getting to Abraham, I promise, but I think it's important to figure out why we're doing this. Romans 15 and verse 4. For whatever was written in earlier times was written for our instruction, so that perseverance and the encouragement of the scriptures, we might have hope. It's written for us by Moses in that captivity to remind them this is who you are, this is where you come from. And what chapter do we pick up Abraham in? Of Genesis? Anybody know? 11-ish, into 11 he's mentioned, but really 12 is where he kicks off. Can I just really quickly give you the introduction they get of history? Chapters 1 and 2 of Genesis are about what? Creation. This is where it all started. God said, let there be light, let there be this, let there be that. God makes them. What happens in chapter 3? That's right. And they fall. We have sin. What's the punishment? Kicked out of the Garden of Eden. Chapter 4, first set of kids from Adam and Eve. What happens? The brother kills his brother. That's how you start. Creation, spend 2 chapters on telling them, and there's not really chapters back then, but you start out with, some verses on this is where it all started from. This is God who made it, and it doesn't take long before man messes it up. And they're kicked out of the garden. And you're thinking, okay, well, maybe they'll salvage it. And the next story is the first set of kids, what's one of them do? Kills one of the other ones. And then all of chapter 5 is basically a genealogy of how we get from Adam to Noah. So we're kind of hitting the big characters. What's Noah going to be famous for? The flood. And so chapters 6 through 9, and really 6 starts. Why does the flood happen? Let me pick on Brandon. Why does the flood happen? The earth, and depending on how your translation in Genesis 6, every thought of man was on evil continually. So what's the reason for the flood? It's like a global reset. Is that an inspire? God creates us, gives us all of this, And this is how we start. It doesn't take us long to mess it up and get kicked out. Then we've got murder, and it doesn't take too many generations where it's so bad, starting over with Noah, right? So that's 6 through 9. World's wicked, the flood, you got Noah. Chapter 10 is the list of nations. Kind of just, okay, this is how far we've come since all that, and we have started to repopulate. Chapter 11 is the Tower of Babel, where they're going to like just take it up and like, let us build this and we'll make a great name for ourselves. And so that you have the separation of people. And chapter 11 ends with, this is how you get from Shem. Who's Shem? One of Noah's kids. Y'all, Bible trivia. Anybody name all 3 sons of Noah? Ham. It's Sunday ham. You got one. Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And so Shem to Abram. I need it in your brain that this is the picture of humanity. God creates, Satan tempts, Adam and Eve sin, kicked out of the garden. That's where you came from. And look at what you had. Look at the garden relationship you had. And they're kicked out, kills his brother, starts with the flood, everything's destroyed. And so God, here he comes along. So God, now what's the plan? And God's like, well, I'm going to call a man who comes from an idol-worshiping family. Remember Joshua 24? What do we learn about Abraham's father? They worship the false gods in Joshua 24, verses 2 and 3. I'm going to call a man from an idol-worshiping family, and I'm going to bless the world through him. I'm going to give him a bunch of descendants and bless the world through his seed. And it's not going to make a whole lot of walking around sense to anyone, because how old is he when he first gets called? Genesis 12, about verses 1 through 5. Anybody know? 75. That's the plan? Okay. And he's got an old wife, because him and his wife have, at this point, never had any kids. This is where the story of redemption is going to kind of start to take shape, and kind of some of these promises, other than, you got the Jesus promise to Eve in the garden about her seed and all of that, and squashing Satan's head. But this is where promises are going to be made that's going to get this ball rolling. This is where the father of faith is going to come from. And it's all starting here with Abraham. That's why it's worth our time to spend a little time on Abraham, because he's in a situation of hoping against hope, a womb as good as dead. You remember us reading from Romans? Abraham's as good as dead. His wife's womb is dead. It is truly laughable to consider the promises that have been made to this man and his wife, but this guy's going to hold on to his faith in God and in his promises the whole way through. This is where we're starting. That don't even make good walking around sense, does it? We're going to start off with an idol worshiper, 75 years old, with a wife that can't have any kids, and this is where we're God's going. What's your reaction to that?
Well, if you look back at it, God always had a limit.
Okay.
All the way from the beginning to right now, like you said, God picked a man from an idol worshiping household. But that Abram had enough faith, and I'm sure he has learned it all the way through his childhood, up to 75 years, that there was a creator beforehand that sees this. And that's what he kept his faith in, that. One thing alone, he kept his faith in the creator.
Just you saying that kind of tickles my brain with like Romans 1, where remember us talking about them being without excuse because what? You ought to know, just by looking around, there is a creator, something higher and holier than you, and somewhere. And so it ought to marvel us a little bit that God just comes and says, we're not told, and I don't know. I don't know how much stories and passed along, because that is one kind of unique thing is, and again, there's a whole chart and you can Google it about who's alive when who's still living. So you could have had some word of mouth, where we came from, story of Noah, some of those older characters, some of them who would have known might have still been around, right? But still, Joshua 24, 2 and 3, at least Abraham's dad wasn't worshiping in sincerity and in purity, was he? Somewhere along the way, he got squirrely on true Jehovah and other things. And so God's going to call Abram from that environment, and here's my guy. And like I said, I don't know how much, Abram knows, but God comes to call him. And when he's willing to, at 70, if you're in the neighborhood of 70, just raise your hand. I'm just curious. If you're just in the neighborhood, and I'm just, fairly settled, and so I'm thinking that you've lived in how long you lived in that place that you're in now?
55 years.
55 years. Oscar, how long you been at that place down there, yours? So I'm just in my head, where my mind goes with that. Are you fairly well rooted where you are by 75? Homeland, Ur of the Chaldees, and how comfortable was it there? And God says, at this stage in your life, which it should be, you'd think, downhill slide, I'm settled, I've got my home, I've got my land, and God says, hey, pack up, we're going somewhere. And you just built a barn.
It'd be rough.
Take your herd with you, and here we go, Oscar. Here we go. That's right. But he has to have a willing participant, and that's where the faith of Abram comes in here, and why he's called the father of faith there, because he's willing to listen and he's willing to go. God calls him, he has the faith to go. Now, we talked about last week the constant reassurance. It's not like God just calls him and he's just, faith's miraculous. And there's multiple times God, with an event happens with him and Lot separate, or this happens, whatever. And God multiple times kind of came back and reminded him, hey man, I got you. I got you. All I'm trying to say is this 4,000-year-old relationship has significance to you and I. The promises that God made to Abraham are promises that you and I are still holding on to. The promises he held on to are promises we're still holding on to. How much of it did he have when Abraham dies? We didn't get a chance to talk about this last week. How much of the promise does he have when he dies? Bible trivia. What were the three promises? Seed, land, and we kind of had it. So everybody learns a little bit different, because we actually had that conversation in the car on the way here. Is seed, I think Jesus. Land, that was pretty easy. And then the world, kind of like this, many is to start, whatever. So of those three, his seed and owning the land and the world being blessed, how many of those in Abraham's lifetime did he fully picture? How much of it did he have? He's got the child. That's the seed. He's got at least one. The descendants like the stars. We're not there yet, but he's got the seed. And there's a little tiny fraction of land that he's got. Anybody know how that played out? He has to buy a piece of land for what? To bury it. So he owns a small piece, and there's a little bit in the Genesis account of him. So that's what he's got so far. And then you read in the Hebrew account about, without even having, they didn't receive what was promised, so they wouldn't get a department. There's just so many beautiful things there. So where I wanted to go, and I was actually going to preach a sermon on this because I got the idea from Wes. I want you to go to Genesis 15. This is what we'll spend a little bit of time talking about this morning. Is he mentioned it, and I went off and wrote a sermon on it and then said, nope, I can't do that. I can't sit here and preach a man's sermon without giving him the opportunity to get to speak on it too, and us kind of have a conversation about it. It's what we have in 15 is another one of the times where God comes along to reassure him. We're kind of walking along this journey, and God just kind of gives him something. And there's just a lot to chew on in this. Let's do 1 through 6. Genesis 15, 1 through 6. Lori, you got your, you can't see this morning. All right. Mr. Rodney, do you mind reading that for us this morning?
After these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision, saying, do not be afraid, Abram, I am your shield, your exceedingly great reward. But Abram said, Lord God, what will you give me, seeing I go childless? And the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus. Then Abram said, look, you have given me no offspring. Indeed, one born in my house is my heir. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, saying, this one shall not be your heir, but one who will come from your own body shall be your heir. And he brought him outside and said, look now toward heaven and count the stars, if you are able to number them. And He said to him, so shall your descendants be. And he believed in the Lord, and he accounted it to him for righteousness.
All right, where I want to focus, I just wanted you to have I love God taking them out here and showing those stars. I had to add that in there. That's extra. You know, I don't charge any. I love, come on, boy. Let me just show you what I have planned for you. But where I really wanted to focus is verse 1. Verse 1. Don't be afraid. I am your shield, your very great or exceedingly great reward. Wes, you want the first crack at it before I pounce in here? Where's your brain going? He even called a little bit this week, and we started Bible class a little early on you guys. Just so you know, we got a little bit of a head start on y'all. So you want to kick off?
First of all, I think all of us can realize the tendency when you're reading something, you just start reading. And you'll read a verse and go right to the next. And one verse can have so much in it if you can just stop and pause. And this is one of those to me. Genesis chapter 15 is one of my favorite chapters, but this is one of my favorite verses. Because when you consider who's speaking, who he's speaking to, and he says, and after these things, because he's just gone and saved Lot, took him back. He had a conversation with the king of Sodom. He gave Melchizedek. I mean, there's a lot that's just happened. And now God comes to him and says, don't be afraid. First of all, God says that to you, how do you want to take it? That's how I start analyzing. And then he says, I am your shield and your exceeding great reward. So then I go with my mind to Goliath, his shield bearer, or his armor bearer. Did it do him any good? Would God do you any good again? I think somewhere I read where Joab had 6 at one time armor bearers. But if they're going up against the wrong one, it's not going to do any good.
That's right.
But the comfort that you would feel if you were Abraham, and then I am your exceeding great reward. Me. But think about who's talking. I. So, and as you say it all the time, I got you.
That's it.
That's what he's saying. That's an ultimate. I got you.
And where my brain went, if God has to come tell you, don't be afraid, why does God have to tell you that? You got a reason to be afraid. I mean, it's like, okay, I'm walking you to the promised land that I said I was going to give you, but how bumpy is that path to the promised land? He's already had to go to war to rescue Lot. Had to have conversation with kings already. I mean, fighting is part of it. Their adversity is part of it. Pharaoh's wanting to take your wife is part of it. I mean, just, hey, let's get up and go. And it's just the easiest, just peaceful Sunday stroll to Canaan. No, sir. He has to come tell him part of this. Don't be afraid, because it ain't a smooth path. Miss Laura?
I always get aggravated with Abraham, and I should, because it shows his humanity. But twice, he didn't hold to
Right.
that verse. And I'm always like, Abraham, why'd you lie? If God is your shield, when you were going into Egypt, why lie about Sarah being your sister? And he did it twice.
I want to piggyback because I'm pouncing on it, but we're going to be, if the sermon's just a do-over, y'all just have to get over it, because I can't separate the one from the other. But it's like, after God's done the 10 plagues, what more proof do you need that God can take care of you? And yet, how long did the proof last? I mean, if he can do all that he did in the plagues, I mean, my mind's like, well, if he's done all that, why would you doubt? Well, brethren, this is where you just take somebody by the hands. Now, brethren, with all God's done for you, why are you doubting it? You know what I mean? But I saw
It shows his humanity.
and it shows us. So it's like, God, what more could God have done for us? What more does he have to prove about how much he loves us and how much he'll carry us through? And yet we still, maybe it's just me, got our moments of doubt too, and where God just says, has to remind us, I got you.
Abraham was a real person.
Yep.
3/4 of the population, if not more, of the entire planet believes he was a real person. But the benefit of Abraham, the story of Abraham, for Moses to the Israelites and for us today, is that the story of Abraham is an introduction into the personality of God.
Amen.
He is doing things repeatedly for Abraham, despite Abraham's struggles, despite his stumbles, to reveal the nature of himself, his patience, his
Grace.
wisdom, and everything else. And that's going to be a benefit for them because, they've got Abraham's problems on steroids, as far as losing faith and backsliding and forgetting and being willful. And he was patient with it.
I mean, y'all catching that connection? He's writing this when Moses is around. And every interaction of God with a Bible character is a picture of God himself. And so I love that connection. Just light bulbs are going off all kinds of is, what are the children of Israel? What's their pattern going to be? And God's patience and God's grace. And same thing. He called Abraham for a reason. It's not a straight path. He's going to stumble a little bit, and God's going to walk him through and keep reassuring him. Wasn't that going to be the walk with Israel? He's going to call them out. He's going to get them out. They're going to stumble, and he's going to show grace, and he's going to show patience, and he's going to kind of get them where beautiful, beautiful. All right, I am your shield. That's kind of where we're going with the sermon. But get behind me rather than trying to stand on your own 2 feet. I am your shield. You just got done going to battle. You reckon shields were part of that? And so to follow it up with, I'll be your shield. Mr. Oscar?
Sure, yeah. If you don't have that reminder, it's the same thing with us. We forget real quick.
That's right.
As you read through, you will see that happening time and time and time again. How do we make it closer to keeping
How many times does God have to show up and remind people who he is? How many times has he had to do that in your life? Where he shows up and has to remind you, this is who I am, and I got this. So I'm your shield. And we have to marinate on this one a little bit. I am your exceedingly great reward. All right? We're going to talk about faith always being from lesser to greater. To have faith in somebody, they're bigger than you. They got more power. Faith is always lesser to greater. We're going to talk about that in the sermon. Here, God is saying, is there a sense in which we, humanity, are what God gets out of this whole creation thing? Are we called, in the book of Ephesians, for example, are we God's inheritance? Are we what he gets out of all of this? That's a biblical picture. The inheritance of the saints is part of what the faithful is. Why would God go through all this? Well, there's going to be a multitude of those who are there with him. And so God kind of gets us and we get to be around his table. Is that the point here? And I don't want to think in like fleshly terms, but it's like, what do we get out of this? And what does God say? You know what you get out of this? Yeah. Is that hitting you where it needs to hit you this morning? What do you want? And God says, I will be your reward. Was that a finger raised for an auctioneer? Because if I see motion, it's sold. So come on.
It's just interesting that it's almost like Paul's writing when he says exceedingly great.
Yes.
You don't need both of those. But he puts it in there so it's a superlative.
Amen.
You're exceedingly great. But there's also kind of an interesting thing. There is no am in the Hebrew. It literally just says, I, Abram, shield.
Okay.
And we make it in English.
Sure.
But it almost has more power when he says, Abram, I shield.
It almost action.
Yeah.
I'll shield. I will shield you. I am the shield. I will be. Yeah. I love that you like just calling attention. Why is it written that way to enunciate? I'm your reward. No. I'm your great reward. No. I'm your exceedingly. In different translations, I have your very great reward, exceedingly great reward's enough. Then you get a great reward. No, you get in it. I love that. I love that you put that together. Bill?
For Chrissy's benefit, I got to refer to Revelation.
We're coming there too. I'm headed there.
The church coming out of the New Jerusalem.
Oh, you got to wait on that one. That's where I'm going. That's where I'm ending, Bill. You can't take my climactic finish away from me. No, go ahead. Fine. It's fine. Go ahead.
We are described in his eyes.
Yes.
It's so exceedingly beautiful.
Yes.
But it's also a marriage ceremony. So we learn about our relationship with God through our relationship with our spouse.
Amen.
Because we're his bride.
Well,
And that's how beautiful we are to him.
I mean, I want to piggyback on that because, again, could you take I'm your great reward and let that go to your head? You might could. But when you appreciate the difference between us and him, we're God's bride. He pursues us like a bride. He does that with Israel. He does that now with the church, whatever. Could that go to your head? Ooh, God's pursuing me. I'm something special. I guess you could. Unless you ignore all of Scripture. But there's value to recognizing that God sees value in us. He wants us. And the massive point behind God wanting us is he doesn't have to. It's not like he needs you. Cattle of 1,000 hills are his. Worship of things made without hands. I mean, he doesn't need that. It's a favor and blessing. He has anything to do with us anyway. And yet and still, and even muddied and bloodied and sinful, he still regards us and can make us a beautiful, spotless bride. I mean, it's beautiful. It is absolutely beautiful. Any other thoughts along that line? Yeah.
That brings to mind the 99.
Okay.
He has
I got
a
99.
definite number.
Yeah.
Already is, but yet he wants one that might start.
It's always one more. And that's my vision of evangelism, my vision of the church. And people, we've grown enough. We're comfortable. There's always room for one more. And that one more to be like, it's infinite, but what does God want? Does he just want the 99? One more. And it doesn't matter if you were dumb enough to walk off on your own stupidity. Did y'all see the video going around on Facebook? I'll paint the picture, and I'll see if I can find it and show it to you guys. So what it is there's a shepherd they dug a trench out, like maybe for some piping or a water line, and he is like struggling, like get that sucker by the feet up out. And he's kicking and screaming, but he's getting that sheep up out. And as soon as he gets it out of there, the sheep just takes off running. He's like all this side, and then kind of does so he's on this side of the line. He's running, and he goes to jump over and lands right back in the middle of the trench. And there were several people posted it kind of saying, this is exactly the way it is with the shepherd and us. We are that sheep. No sooner does he get us out of the pit, here we come off, taking off running. It's almost comical, but it's biblical to kind of, Abraham is a microcosm of that. Israel's going to be a picture of that. He's going to pull the sheep out and they're going to jump right back into it. We at times can be that same picture.
Think about that from your approach with people. Is God overly judgmental on Abraham on those 2 times that he lied? Did that shepherd shoot that sheep in the head in the ditch? He regarded Abraham as valuable. The shepherd regarded that sheep as valuable. That's why he's trying to get it back.
Amen.
And how do we approach people? Are we going to be judgmental? Or are we going to try to see them as valuable as God sees them?
And this was our point more from last night, even as faithful and great faith as Abraham has, even Abraham got constant reassurances of God cuts a covenant with him, like right after this in 15. It's like almost like every big event pops up. It's almost like he lets Lot choose, Abraham lets Lot choose, and Lot walks off, and then God it's almost like the text kind of lets him separate and says, I just want to remind you, I got a plan for you. Then he has to go rescue Lot, and he comes back here and says, I just want to remind you, I got a plan for you, and I'm going to be your great reward. And then something else happens, and God comes back around and says, I just want to remind you, I don't know if it's you, but I need that, right? There are some of you that are rock solid at times in your faith, and I marvel at the steady as she goes. Some people just grab a hold of it, and it seems like, and maybe they do, you just never see it, but they've just got this strength about them. And I honor and I value that. I'm just going to tell you, that's not the picture of my walk. I need constant reassurances of, I got you, and I'll be your great word. I wanted to give you just real quick before we close about the 3 promises. I'm going to keep beating these in your head. I don't care if we remember them exactly the same way, as long as you get the gist of what they are. That there is a land one. There is a number of descendants one. Nature of the world is kind of where my wife likes to go at. And then that seed one. And I just want to reemphasize about how those apply to us and kind of even are somewhat fulfilled, or maybe are, I don't know, I don't know why I'm hedging on, but I think they're fulfilled in the church. The promises to Abraham, I see fulfillment in the church. Let's break it down. Can I read you Galatians 3, and then let's break that down, those 3. As you kind of think about that, how are those 3 promises fulfilled in us? Why are we still holding on to these same promises? I just want to read Galatians 3 and kind of put it in your brain. Let's look at 26 through 29. And just for the sake of time, if you'll kind of peek at like chapter 3 and verse 6, whose name's mentioned, and verse 9 and verse 8, and, verse 14 and verse 16. I mean, who's the whole chapter about? Abraham. He's making a comparison here. Now, for our purposes, look at 26 through 29. Miss Holly, do you mind reading that for us?
There is no longer Jew or Gentile, slave or free, male or female, but you are all one in Christ Jesus. And now that you belong to Christ, you are the true children. Abraham, you are his heirs, and promise to Abraham belongs to you.
You see that? If you put on Christ in baptism, what are you? You're Abraham's. You're part of that. So, in what way? So let's just take the Genesis 15 one. When God walks Abraham out and says, this is what it's going to, you're going to have descendants like the number of stars in the heavens. How's that seen in the church? How many Christians are there? How many faithful are there? I mean, and here's why I say sometimes we get, because a lot of us worship in small churches, and we get the road is narrow and few there be who find it. And I get that. But when you add up all the few of all of time and Revelation, what's the picture? A multitude you can't count. Abraham, there's going to be, that's goosebumpy stuff. And where I want to inspire you to is you can be part of that. And it's not because of any inherent greatness on your part that you get to be part of this. You get to be part of it exactly the same way Abraham got to be the starter of it is you just got to believe. Isn't that amazing? You don't have to be the fastest. You don't have to be the wealthiest. You don't have to be the smartest. You don't have to have any inherent value in you about what your own personal greatness is. All you have to do to be part of this is believe what God told you and hold on to that promise. And we can be part of that number that's more than the stars you can count. Isn't that kind of cool? We're a fulfillment of that. All right, the seed one. Where does your mind go through your seed and kind of what we're studying, lineage and whatever? How is that fulfilled? How do you see that?
From his seed, Abraham's seed.
And which is why are we studying this in the first place? Why are we even picking Abraham? Because Matthew 1 and verse 1, Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. So that seed, it's Jesus, and you better, so we can be part of it through faith and the number. We got the seed. What about the land? We don't live in Palestine, and I really could care less whether the Palestinians get control over it or Israel gets. I really don't care about the Gaza Strip. I'm just gonna, I don't, and all that. Now, I'm not speaking of stuff I don't care who owns it. Is that what it's about? A physical piece of land? What's the land promised to us? Huh?
Nothing.
You don't think there's one at all? I do think there's one. I just don't think it's in Palestine or Israel.
Where's your hope anchor?
What? So hey, I'm messing with you. When we sing the song, to Canaan's land, I'm on my way. Are we packing up on a flight to Jerusalem? Where are you headed? What's the land? So we do have a land promise. Man, we got all kinds of stuff that use that in a figurative sense. We've got a place that we get to dwell. Ooh. John 14 ringing any bells? I have a place prepared for you. In my Father's house are many dwelling places. That's a place. That's a land. And right now we can go to Revelation. If you'll look at Revelation 21, Bill tried to rob my big moment from me, and I sucked it back from him. 1 through 3. Revelation 21, 1 through 3. Mr. Kevin, do you mind?
Now I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. Also there was no more sea. Then I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men. He will dwell with them, and they shall be his people. God himself will be with them and be their God.
Tabernacle. Not everybody's version has tabernacle. Some of you may have the dwelling of God or the it means the same thing, but even if you don't have that word, what does he flat out say? I will what? Dwell with you. I hope part of where your brain goes with that is back to Genesis 1 and 2 where it all started. What's God want? What is the next chapter of Revelation picture? Where are we headed back to? In a figurative sense or literal sense, whatever, we'll argue that some other time. Where are we headed back to? A garden, a place, a land. That's you and I have that to look forward to. And all you got to do to have a part of that is believe. Believe. That's why we've been on. Can I just tell you, I don't know if I've told you all the why behind why we're on the sermon series that we're on. We've been talking about faith for like a couple months now. Y'all, I don't know if y'all picked up on that theme or not yet, right? But it just hit me. It's like that's such a basic kind of concept, and yet it's what it's all about. And maybe we just need reminders at times that Jesus is real. He really walked here. That God really did create. There really was a resurrection. God really is in control. I mean, all these things, that's why we're walking through what we're walking. And that's why we talked about just 2 Sundays, we walk by faith and not by sight. All right, we'll stop there this morning. I appreciate y'all's comments. This is good stuff. I don't know. Man, you know what? I might just catch whatever. We might hit Abraham one more time. You just never know. It's not like there's not enough there, but I'll try to give you a heads up where we're headed. Love y'all.